Imagine this. One of the greatest films in cinema history almost never made it to the big screen. When director Frank Darabont first approached Stephen King about adapting his short novel Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, even King himself thought it was a bad idea. The story was too internal, too psychological, unfilmable, as Hollywood would later call it. But here's the twist most fans never hear. Stephen King didn't just hand over the rights, he sold them for $1 single. That's right, $1. This was part of his little-known Dollar Baby program, where he'd let promising filmmakers adapt his shorter works for basically free, just to give them a shot. Tim Robbins later revealed that this gesture created a rare kind of freedom on set. There were no massive budgets, no studio execs breathing down Darabont's neck. We weren't making a blockbuster. The stakes didn't seem high, which gave Frank complete creative control. And Morgan Freeman has admitted something even more ironic. The film that would one day be ranked #1 on IMDb for years started out as an afterthought. Columbia Pictures didn't know what to do with it. To them, it was just another small prison drama. But in hindsight, that smallness was the secret weapon. With almost no expectations, Darabont and his cast built something timeless. A film that mirrored Andy Dufresne's own story, dismissed, underestimated, and yet destined for greatness. And that humble beginning set the stage for what came next. A prison so real, so haunting, that it became more than just a backdrop. It became a character of its own.
To capture the crushing reality of prison life, Darabont made a decision that changed the entire film. He didn't build a set. He shot inside a real prison, the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. This wasn't just any building. It was a massive Gothic fortress shut down only 4 years earlier for being too brutal, too inhumane to house actual inmates. The place carried decades of suffering in its walls, and the cast felt it. Clancy Brown, who played the sadistic Captain Hadley, admitted that the prison almost did the acting for him. He said, quote, "Every morning, walking through those gates, you could feel the weight of misery. You didn't need to fake it." Tim Robbins went even further. Between takes, he would sit alone in a tiny 6-by-8-foot cell just to feel the claustrophobia. He later said, quote, "When that door shut, something primal happened in your brain. The panic was real." But here's the detail that most fans never realize. Many of the extras you see in the background, they weren't actors. They were former inmates of that very prison. When you watch the yard scenes or the cafeteria sequences, those weathered faces, those hard stares, they weren't rehearsed. They were lived experiences. Even the production design had layers of authenticity. The crew aged different sections of the prison walls depending on the decade a scene took place. Over time, you can actually see the stone walls looking cleaner in flashbacks and more worn in the later years. It's a detail so subtle, most audiences never consciously notice it, but it makes the world of Shawshank feel eerily real. Morgan Freeman later reflected, "I wasn't playing a prisoner on a movie set. I was playing a man trapped inside that specific hellhole." And there's a difference. The prison itself wasn't just a setting. It was an uncredited character, one that haunted every single frame of the film. But if the location was powerful, what truly gave Shawshank its soul were the men inside it and the hidden lives the actors built behind their characters. On the surface, The Shawshank Redemption is about Andy and Red, but behind the camera, the cast built lives for their characters that never made it into the script. Hidden details that shape every look and every line. Tim Robbins, for example, created an entire backstory for Andy Dufresne that the audience never hears. He wrote pages of notes about Andy's childhood, his marriage, even his secret routines inside prison. Robbins explained, "I needed Andy to feel like a real man, not just the plot device. So when you see me polishing those rocks or sitting silently in the yard, I knew exactly what Andy was thinking." Freeman also made a bold choice that changed Red forever. In Stephen King's story, Red was written as a white Irishman. Freeman wasn't just cast, he redefined the role. Freeman said he imagined Red as a man who had seen everything, lost everything, and was now surviving only by trading storytelling and wisdom. He said, "I wasn't just narrating Andy's life, I was preserving my own." But the supporting cast brought equally powerful layers. Bob Gunton, who played the corrupt warden, prepared by studying real-life televangelists and political figures. That cold smile he wore when quoting Bible verses, it was copied from a preacher he saw in his hometown. And then there's James Whitmore, who played Brooks. Most fans don't know this, but Whitmore spent weeks visiting retirement homes, watching how older men carried themselves, the shuffle of their feet, the hesitation
hesitation in their hands. His heartbreaking scene at the halfway house wasn't just act, it was grounded in real observation of men abandoned by time. Even the smallest roles carried hidden weight. The prisoners who played chess, shared cigarettes, or laughed in the background. Many had crafted their own prison stories, never spoken, but always visible if you watch closely. It was this invisible labor, these unspoken histories, that made Shawshank's world feel alive. Every face had a past, every gesture had meaning, and yet for all the death the actors created, one surprising accident almost changed the entire film's most iconic performance forever. Here's the thing about the Shawshank Redemption. The deeper you look, the more you realize it isn't just a prison story. It's a film layered with hidden messages and visual symbolism that most viewers never consciously catch. Take Andy Dufresne. If you rewatch closely, you'll notice that Andy is almost always framed behind some kind of barrier. Bars, railings, even fences, even when other prisoners in the same shot are not. Director Frank Darabont did this on purpose. It's a visual reminder that Andy is imprisoned not only by the walls of Shawshank, but by his innocence, his double life, and the secret escape plan he carries in silence. He's the most caged man in the entire prison. Then there's the famous rooftop scene, where Andy gets his fellow inmates cold beers under the hot sun. To most people, it's just a small taste of freedom, but Morgan Freeman later revealed that this scene is the moment Andy begins his real escape. While the others are enjoying beer, Andy is making a deal with the guard, quietly positioning himself as the financial brain of Shawshank. It's the first brick in the tunnel to freedom. And what about that line, "Get busy living or get busy dying"? It isn't just a catchy phrase. It was actually written on the wall of Darabont's office during filming. Every decision, every scene was built to reflect that choice. Brooks chooses death. Andy chooses life. Red spends decades caught in between, until finally he makes his choice too. Even the movie posters covering Andy's escape tunnel weren't chosen at random. Tim Robbins explained that they represent Andy's journey. Rita Hayworth as innocence, Marilyn Monroe as temptation and complexity, and Raquel Welch as something primal, almost prehistoric. By the time Andy crawls through the tunnel, it's as if he's shed every layer of society, reborn, raw, and free. And if you pay attention to the weather, you'll notice another hidden detail. It's always raining in moments of despair, during attacks, during betrayals, during the warden's downfall. But the final scene in Mexico, for the first time in the entire film, the sun shines bright and clear. It's nature itself telling us hope has finally won. Darabont and his cast weren't just making a prison movie, they were building a visual poem. One where every drop of rain, every camera angle, every poster on a wall tells us something about the meaning of hope. But here's the real shocker. Some of Shawshank's most powerful moments, the ones fans love most, almost never made it into the movie at all. Some of the most unforgettable moments in the Shawshank Redemption, the ones fans quote, rewatch, and cry over, were never part of the original plan. They were accidents, rewrites, and last-minute choices that changed the movie forever. Take Red's bus ride at the very end. Originally, the film ended with Red simply walking down that dusty road after leaving prison. Alone, uncertain, his fate left ambiguous. But test audiences hated it. They needed closure. So Darabont quickly wrote the bus monologue. Morgan Freeman recorded it in just one take, and that quiet, hopeful voiceover transformed the ending into pure magic. And then there's Brooks. In Stephen King's original story, Brooks barely exists. He's a background character. But James Whitmore's haunting performance during the parole and suicide subplot was so powerful that Darabont expanded his role. That one decision gave the world one of the most heartbreaking storylines in film history. The tale of a man so institutionalized, he simply couldn't survive freedom. But perhaps the most shocking change was the final reunion scene on the beach in Zihuatanejo. Darabont originally didn't want to show Andy and Red meeting again. He wanted it vague, almost dreamlike. But studio executives pushed back, worried the audience needed to see hope pay off. Darabont fought against it until he saw the footage. That final handshake by the ocean, it wasn't just fan service, it was catharsis, a visual promise that the story's suffering truly led somewhere. Even the most iconic shot in the movie, Andy standing in the rain, arms raised after crawling through the tunnel, was improvised. The script only said Andy emerges, but on set, Robbins instinctively lifted his arms to the sky. Darabont loved it so much, he called it the baptism of freedom. It's wild to think about. Without these last-minute changes, Shawshank might have been remembered remembered as a bleak little prison drama. Instead, it became a masterpiece of hope. But the darkness wasn't all fictional. One of Shawshank's most terrifying villains was inspired by a very real man. Every great hero needs a great villain. And in the Shawshank Redemption, that villain is Warden Samuel Norton. Bible in one hand, corruption in the other. But here's the chilling truth. Norton wasn't just fiction. He was modeled on real people. Bob Gunton, the actor who played him, has said he didn't base the character on just one man, but on a type he'd seen his whole life. Authority figures who use religion and power to mask cruelty. He studied televangelists from the 1980s, politicians who preach morality in public while hiding scandals in private. That fake smile, that cold delivery of Bible verses, it wasn't act, it was mimicry. But the setting added another layer of reality. The Ohio State Reformatory, where Shawshank was filmed, had its own history of corruption. Guards had been accused of brutality. Wardens were known for being ruthless. When Gunton walked those halls in character, he said it felt like the ghosts of real prisoners were watching him, judging whether he could live up to their memories of fear. Even the small details were authentic. Notice how Norton always quotes scripture when he's about to commit some act of evil. The Lord sees everything, or salvation lies within. Darabont revealed that this was lifted from interviews with real inmates, who described corrupt officials twisting religion as a weapon. And then there's Norton's downfall, locking himself in his office, choosing a bullet over justice. It wasn't just written for drama. It was inspired by real historical wardens who, when cornered by scandal, chose suicide over facing trial. Gunton later admitted something eerie. He said, "People still come up to me and say they knew someone exactly like Norton." That's the scariest compliment I could ever get. The warden may have been a fictional character, but his evil was all too real. And yet, against this cruelty, Shawshank offers something rare in cinema, a deeper meaning of redemption itself, one that goes far beyond escaping a prison cell. The word redemption is right there in the title, but most fans never stop to ask, what does it actually mean in the film? On the surface, it's Andy's redemption, an innocent man reclaiming his freedom, but Frank Darabont and Stephen King wove the theme much deeper. In fact, almost every major character experiences their own form of redemption or fails to. Andy's journey isn't just about breaking out of prison, it's about refusing to let prison break him. He spends 2 decades preserving pieces of his humanity, carving chess pieces, building a library, playing music over the loudspeakers. These aren't distractions, they're acts of defiance. They're his way of staying alive inside, so that when freedom comes, there's still something left of him to save. Red's redemption is different. He isn't innocent. He admits it himself. "I committed murder. That's the only crime I'm guilty of." His story isn't about escaping walls, but escaping despair. For years, he tells himself hope is dangerous, but Andy proves him wrong. Red's redemption comes not from the parole board, but from finally daring to believe that life beyond Shawshank is possible. And then there's Brooks, the tragic reminder of what happens when redemption fails. After decades in prison, he can't adapt. He doesn't find freedom. He finds only emptiness. His story is a warning. Redemption must be chosen or it never comes. Even the warden fits the theme in a twisted way. He preaches salvation but never seeks it. His redemption is only death, a hollow end to a hollow life. Darabont once explained it this way: Shawshank isn't about a prison break, it's about breaking free of whatever has imprisoned you. That could be guilt, fear, loneliness, or the walls we build around ourselves. And maybe that's why the movie resonates so deeply. Even decades later, it isn't just Andy and Red's story, it's ours. Because at some point, we all faced a choice. Get busy living or get busy dying. But here's the irony. For all its timeless lessons, Shawshank almost vanished into obscurity. The film we now call one of the greatest ever made was originally considered a failure.
It's hard to believe now, but when The Shawshank Redemption first hit theaters in 1994, it flopped badly. The title confused audiences. Marketing was almost non-existent, and it was released the same year as Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump. Against giants like that, Shawshank didn't stand a chance. Box office numbers were disappointing, and many critics dismissed it as just another prison movie. But here's where the story takes its own Andy Dufresne twist. Like Andy crawling through a tunnel of filth to find freedom, Shawshank slowly found its way to greatness. Cable television picked it up. VHS rentals exploded. Word of mouth spread. Suddenly, a movie nobody cared about in theaters became the film everyone was recommending to their friends. By the late 90s, it wasn't just popular, it was legendary. It climbed to the very top of IMDb's greatest films list, where it stayed for years. In classrooms, professors used it to teach storytelling, cinematography, even philosophy. The Ohio State Reformatory, once abandoned, transformed into a tourist landmark.
Today, thousands of fans walk its halls every year just to feel a piece of Shawshank's magic. Morgan Freeman once said, "Shawshank works because it isn't about prison, it's about hope, and hope is universal." What began as a $1 short story adaptation became one of the most beloved films in history. And maybe that's the ultimate lesson. Just like Andy, Shawshank proved that no matter how small or underestimated something may seem, hope can turn it into something immortal. So the next time you hear that iconic line, "Get busy living or get busy dying," remember, it's not just dialogue, it's the heartbeat of a story that refused to be forgotten.